In this demonstration, we're going to highlight creating and working with personas and AI assistants. We will use Claude Code to create skills and personas modeled after a software development team. If you're not already familiar with personas, this will give you an idea of how to organize and structure your context in a way our brains are already trained to think, which is working with teams where members have defined roles. There are a few things worth noting. The first is that this does not have to be for software development, like our example is going to focus on. This could utilize the same techniques if you work in marketing, sales, human resources, construction, a dentist's office, or if you're a student, running your own business, or any area where you could imagine having team coordination to achieve whatever it is you want to achieve. Another thing worth mentioning is that although we're going to be using Claude Code, these techniques can be applied to virtually any other AI assistant, whether it's Gemini, ChatGPT. The approach is the same. Lastly, I want to make it clear that this is not about replacing people or teams in current organizations. These are personal teams to assist you in your domain as you work with AI agents. A project manager may have an entirely different concept of a personal assistant team than, say, a software developer, but each could benefit from a project manager and a software development on their own personal team. Before we go any further, I want to drive one point home. There's no magic happening here. Personas, skills, context, these are all just text files. Plain text that gets loaded into the AI assistant before you start working. That's it. What you're looking at on this slide is the whole picture. On the left, you have your inputs, a persona file that defines the role, tone, and behavior, a skills file that tells the assistant what it can do, and a context file that carries the background and goals. Those three files flow into the AI assistant, and on the right, you get focused responses that stay in scope, a consistent voice that behaves predictably, and a system that's reusable across any AI tool. So why does any of this matter? Because how you organize those files is how you succeed with AI systems. That line at the bottom of the slide is the key takeaway. The reason personas work so well is not because of anything clever the AI is doing on its own. It's because we're organizing information the same way we already organize people, by role, by responsibility, by domain. We've been doing that in terms of organizations our entire lives. We already know how to think that way. Personas just let us apply that same mental model to our text files. Let's look at what it actually looks like to work with an AI agent using just the context window. Say you need a report on your top selling products. Here's what that workflow looks like today. You upload an Excel spreadsheet, you ask the agent to get a list of products, you ask it to query the database for the total sales volume and add that to the spreadsheet. The agent uses an MCP tool or CLI to connect to the database. You ask it to pull up the top 10 grossing products, and then you ask it to notify the right team members by email. 6 steps, 6 separate instructions. You're essentially acting as a project manager, handing the agent one task at a time and making sure nothing gets missed. Now, look at the right side, working with a persona. Dana, can you send the top 10 grossing products from last month's sales spreadsheet to the marketing team? Add a column for the sales volume for each product. That's it. One sentence to a person you know. Dana understands the context, knows the tools, and handles the rest. That's the difference. With a persona, you're not managing a process, you're delegating it to a colleague. Now let's look under the hood at what's actually different between working with the context and working with a persona. When you're working with context, the model has full access to everything. Every skill in the inventory, summarize, translate, classify, write code, debug, reformat, search, brainstorm, all of it is on the table. Every single time you send a message, the model draws from the entire skill library on every turn. That sounds powerful, and it is. But it also means the model is always making a choice about which skills are relevant. And when your library is large, that's a lot of surface area. A persona works differently. When you configure a persona, you assign it a specific set of skills, just what the role needs to do its job. A sales assistant, for example, gets summarize, draft, email, brainstorm, classify, synthesize, and plan. That's the toolkit. Write code, debug, translate, search, reformat, extract, those aren't part of this role. So they're simply not available to it. This is the key idea. The persona is pre-configured. It doesn't have to decide what it can do. That's already been decided. It just does its job. The result is a more focused, more predictable collaborator. You know what Dana can do because you defined it, and that's exactly how it works on a real team. Here's where it starts to feel like a real team. Once you have multiple personas set up, they don't just work in isolation, they can hand off to each other. This is what we mean by AI agents collaborating. Take a look at this example. We have three personas: Claire in IT, Steve as a sysadmin, and Nichole in onboarding. A new employee needs to get set up. Claire is the first point of contact. That's her role. But setting up a login, that's not in Claire's skill set. That belongs to Steve. So Claire routes the request. Can you set up my login? Steve picks it up. He handles it. Sure. Does the work. Done. Now Claire knows the login is ready, and the next step isn't in Steve's lane either. Nichole handles onboarding notifications. So Claire passes it along. Okay, I am set up. Send the onboarding notification. Three personas, one seamless workflow. No one did anything outside of their role. That's the power of the handoff. Each persona knows what it owns, and when something falls outside of those boundaries, it moves to the right persona automatically, just like it would on your team. So let's meet the team. This is who we're going to build today. Six AI personas, each with a defined role and set of responsibilities, working together just like a real team would. Nichole is our administrative assistant. She handles the day to day to do list, reminders, schedules, and appointments, the things that keep everyone organized. Brad is our senior engineer. Software development, repository management, architecture, infrastructure, security. Brad is the technical backbone of the team. Sam is the data engineer. Database, storage, queries, reports. If it involves data, Sam owns it. Destiny is our skills administrator. This is a unique role specific to an AI team. Destiny is responsible for continuous improvement of the AI tooling itself. Skills, agents, persona. She keeps the team sharp. Claire handles records management. She's a single source of truth for the team. Documentation, business knowledge, secrets, anything that needs to be remembered and referenced later. And Jay is our project manager. Backlogs, Scrum, work items, bugs, scheduling, prioritization. Jay keeps everything moving. Six people, six clear lanes. And in just a moment, we're going to use Claude Code to build them, creating the personas, defining the skills, and standing up a working virtual team right here in front of you. Let's get started. Okay, in order to get started, one of the first things that we're going to need to do is we're going to have to make sure that we have access to our file system. In Claude, we can look at our extensions, and you should see an Anthropic extension named File System that you can install. If you do not have this installed, go ahead and install it now. Once it's installed, you'll have to configure it with the directories that you want it to have access to. I'm going to go ahead and add the directory where our files for this skill and persona will be stored. We're going to use one of Claude's features called projects in order to organize the project for our team we're going to be creating. This is not necessary. You can use standard chat or code, but for this demonstration, we're going to use projects. I'm going to go ahead and create a new project here, and I'm going to call it IT team. I'm going to give it a short description. We're developing personas for an IT team. I'm going to go ahead and create the project. So in our IT team project, for the first conversation, I'm giving it an overview of what we're going to be working on. This does not have to be done in a particular way, but there are some things to note that will help the context help you. I would like to begin working on a set of personas and skills. This will represent an IT team. Each member will be responsible for certain roles and responsibilities. For each team member, I want to create a persona. Each persona will be named, and I would like to give you a brief description of the roles and responsibilities for each persona and have you interview me if you need more information. The personas will have access to skills. As the roles and responsibilities are defined, the skills should be organized by the persona. We're going to be creating these markdown files in the following folder. I provided the full directory path here, as you can see. Our Claude folder for our user profile is located at, this is the location of our Claude folder on my particular setup. I'll go over that in just a minute. We'd like to create symbolic links from our team folder to our Claude folder, and you decide how to organize the relevant personas and skills. Let's go ahead and get started. As we can see, Claude is following our prompt instructions by stopping to interview us to gather more information where it's necessary. Here it's asking us, which IT roles do you want on your virtual team? Pick all that can apply. So it's fine to select roles from these suggestions that Claude gives you, and actually they're quite good. But for the purposes of this demonstration, we're going to create each role one by one so we can see how the interaction works without Claude having the chance to write the whole thing in a one shot. So I'm going to instruct Claude. I would like to work on each persona in order. I will be naming them. In my particular profile, I have already created personas in the past. However, I don't want to take any advantage from what I may have set up for the purposes of this demonstration. So in this step, I'm asking Claude to deprecate any of the persona commands that we already have. That way we can get a fresh start. I've asked Claude to deprecate the prior persona commands, and we're starting with a clean state. So as you can see here, it's presenting a proposed structure for the directories. As we talked about symlinks, junction points on Windows, so we're going to have the actual markdown files in specific folders that we can check into a repository, but we're going to symlink it to our Claude profile directory. It's gone ahead and run some PowerShell scripts to set this up. And you can see that we're green checked all the way across on the structure of our team and our commands and our personas. So Claude is informing me that we're ready to build the first persona. It's asking me who the first team member is, asking me to tell the name and the role, and that they will interview me on their responsibilities, personality, communication style, and how they will interact with the rest of the team. This is exactly what I want because I want to build this as you would build or hire an actual team. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put in Nichole, our administrative assistant. She handles the day-to-day to-do lists, reminders, schedules, appointments, the things that keep everything organized. Claude is going to present us with a selection of personalities and tone. You can always write something else if you want a specific personality or tone, but I'm going to go with cheerful and energetic. Always upbeat, keeps morale high. Since Nichole is our administrative assistant, I'm going to have her communicate in a conversational style. When something falls through the cracks or someone misses a deadline, Nichole gently follows up without making anyone feel bad. We're going to play nice. Now Claude is asking us for Nichole's responsibilities. We can pick multiple items from here. So we want Nichole to maintain to-do lists and task tracking, scheduling appointments, reminders and follow-ups, meeting notes, onboarding and team collaboration, as well as intake. Let's go all the way across the board. How does Nichole handle task ownership across the team? She owns the master task for the list for the whole team. She manages her own queue and routes tasks to others. She tracks tasks per person and reports status. She only manages tasks assigned directly to her. Because we don't want any overlap, we're going to have her manage tasks directly assigned to her. We don't want her fulfilling the project manager's responsibilities and roles. These are completely subjective. This question is about routing. When a new request comes in that isn't clearly hers, Nichole routes requests to whoever's best suited, acknowledges, logs them, and asks who should own it. She handles intake and waits to be told where to send things. She coordinates directly with the team lead to triage. I'm going to have Nichole route requests to whoever is best suited. How well does Nichole know the rest of the team? She knows everyone's role and can describe what they do. Let's give all of the above. So the persona for Nichole is complete. It's giving us a final checklist, telling us which files were created. We have a personas file that has the roster of people on our team. We have a Nichole persona, and we have commands that are assigned to Nichole. Team/Nichole is a slash command that we would use to actually run a command. This is going to explain how it works in Claude code. Team Nichole activates her persona. She'll greet you in character and stay in voice. She knows her roster, routes requests to the right teammate, and only owns what's hers. As we have more team members, they get added to the roster so every person stays current. Then it's asking me if I'm ready for the next team member, and we're going to go ahead and do that now. In order to keep our presentation as concise as possible, I've let Claude work ahead. The next member we've added is our senior software engineer. As you can see, Claude has asked me some of the same questions: the personality and voice, the character, the technical domain, team dynamics. Once it has everything it needs, it writes the persona, updates the roster, and gives us a few notes about the next person that we're going to be working on. I'm going to do this with the technical roles and the project manager because those are scoped to the IT industry. As mentioned, for your particular needs, this might be marketing, sales, or anything else. You best know the details on the roles and responsibilities of the teams that you work with. So I'm just going to run through these rather rapidly until we get to a couple of roles which are of particular interest. The next persona that we've added is Sam. Sam is the data engineer. Databases, storage, queries, reports. If it involves data, Sam owns it. Again, Claude interviewed me with the personality and voice, technical domain, team dynamics. In this particular instance, I have Brad and Sam working closely with each other, Brad being the software developer and Sam being the DBA. So naturally, their communication is going to be more complex and more tightly bound to each other than to some of the other team members. So it's gone ahead and added to the roster the new team member, our data engineer. and given us the same rundown about how to initiate this persona. The next persona that we were going to be working on, I believe, is the most important on the team. We will be working on Destiny. Destiny is our skills administrator. This is a unique role specific to an AI team. Destiny is responsible for continuous improvement of the AI tooling itself, skills, agents, personas. She keeps the team sharp. When you start working with your team, you're going to find that inevitably you're going to run into problems. Just like designing any other system, thinking of everything that might happen up front is nearly impossible to do. The same applies to personas. We start with a small set of responsibilities and roles, but as we use the personas, we want them to become more efficient. We want them to remember important tasks, especially those that are routinely executed. We do not want our personas to continuously ask us the same questions. You can think of this as training. In the real world, when we hire team members, they need to be brought up to speed. Destiny will be the single resource that has the responsibility of improving our skills and personas. Destiny is the master trainer. When we want to make our team more efficient or expand upon it, Destiny is the team member that we will rely on to actually update the persona and skills files for a particular team member. I've chosen the name Destiny because the success of the team is going to depend on her. I have a strong opinion about a role like this in any team that you might create. I consider this persona mandatory. Because this is our most important role or persona, we're going to work on this one carefully. For her working style, we're going to choose systematic and process oriented, improvement through measure and iteration. We're going to have Destiny approach her work in a formal, structured process, documented changes, approval before action. I think this best sums up what we would want this role to do, as we would want things documented and we would want approval so that we can make sure that we are asking Destiny clearly what we want her to do. When Destiny identifies something that isn't working well, her tone is, we're going to say, direct and candid. This is one persona that we want to be rather serious. This is a very important section here. Which of these fall under Destiny's ownership? Authoring, maintaining skills file, absolutely. Authoring and maintaining persona files, definitely. Evaluating skill and persona performance, yes. Proposing and documenting improvements, retiring outdated or underperforming skills and persona, onboarding new AI tooling and agents. We're going to select all of the above because this perfectly sums up what this persona is intended to do. We're going to have her actively scout and accept input from the team. We're going to have her, we're going to hand her the ability to make low risk edits autonomously, but escalate significant changes. What does Destiny's ownership look like in terms of the actual file system? We have our Claude skills directory. We have our personas team and commands team. We have our directory where we're actually creating these persona files. So we're going to give her all of the above. The whole AI tooling stack is her territory. When Destiny escalates a significant change, what does that process look like? We're going to have her write a change proposal doc before touching anything significant. Auditing a persona for quality, Destiny, we're going to say that she will cross reference a persona against a roster and the team's actual workflow. So Claude has completed our Destiny persona and added it to the roster. It also gave us a nice quote at the end that I rather like. Her closing quote is self referential in the best way. Tooling that isn't maintained isn't tooling, it's technical debt with a persona. Love it. The next team member we're going to add is Claire. Claire handles records management. She's the single source of truth for the team: documentation, business knowledge, secrets, anything that needs to be remembered and referenced later. This is also a persona that I consider very important. When you're working with Claude, you're often prompted for directory names, file names, names of scripts, web references, you name it. This is stored in context memory, but when you start new sessions, you're going to be asked the same questions again. Claire is the librarian of sorts. Everything that is a reference, the entire knowledge base for the team, Claire is going to update, maintain, and keep track of that. So, again, this role is very important. Now, for our knowledge base, I'm going to select meticulous and orderly, a place for everything, everything in its place. Sounds like a great personality to have for a librarian. I'm going to have her minimal. The way I intend to use this is essentially saying things like, Claire, our repository for such and such is at this URL. So I'm going to have her minimal. She returns exactly what was asked for and nothing more. We're going to have her correct outdated information. She will immediately update the record. If we run into problems with that later on, we can give further instructions. What categories of information fall under Claire's custody? We're going to pick all that apply, but we're going to give all of the above. Now, there's a little bit of information, background information about secrets and credentials. In your Claude profile, you can have a .env file. This resides on disk, and this is much like something that you might set up in Docker. Um, it's an environment variable file. By default, when Claude installs the desktop version, it does not have this file. So this is something that you may need to add. You can also use environmental variables. You can add a particular file with any given name and let Claire know where this is. But the key thing to remember is that these are secrets. These are things that you do not want getting out. So we don't want Claude to repeat, say, an API key in a conversation. So that has to be very clear. But we're going to go ahead and give her access to all of the above. We're going to worry about our secrets and credentials as necessary. I'm going to have her adapt to the use case. Some things might be flat files like our environment. Some might be a structured knowledge base with categories, cross references. I'm going to let her decide where and how to store those. I'm going to give the team access so that they can pick up on things they need to store for the future and ask Claire to store them. For access to sensitive records, secrets, and credentials, we're going to have her access by role. We're going to have her live in the docs folder already in the project because in that particular folder, we are going to have that checked into a source code repository. And for our purposes on this particular team, we're going to make sure that none of our credentials get checked in. We do want to keep track of the knowledge base, so I would like to have that in a repository. This could just as well be a shared um, file drive. Again, important to remember where the secrets are stored and credentials and who has access to them. But we're going to go ahead and tell her that the knowledge base lives in a docs folder for the project. We only want her to respond to direct requests. The final persona that we're going to be working on is Jay. Jay's our project manager. Backlogs, Scrum, work items, bugs, scheduling, prioritization. Jay keeps everything moving. Our team is technology focused. So we have a project manager that would have access to some of the usual things you would think of, like perhaps GitHub repos, Azure DevOps, anywhere where we manage our Scrum, perhaps Jira, things like that. But what I want to drive home is that these AI teams are not necessarily geared only towards technical work. For instance, if you're running a sales business that sells items online, you could create a role for a project manager that handles things such as knowing where your inventory is, how to order, and if there's a new product coming online, you can talk to this persona to create marketing material, to organize it, to preview it, to get everything ready for you. In other instances, you can think of this almost as a general manager. They kind of are the starting point, the persona that you're going to interact with potentially the most, that will delegate some of the other tasks to the other personas. So, again, I want to emphasize that our project manager is a classic technology project manager, but this can be a general manager or any persona of sorts that is kind of a top level persona that is used to communicate high level objectives. So our project manager role persona is now complete. His blocker response is deliberate and situational. He reads the nature of the blocker, routes accordingly. He has a relationship with Nichole that's a coordination layer, so that we can ask Nichole where a particular project is or what's going on with a particular project. So they'll have some tight integration there. Um, his scope creep pattern is mature. He absorbs it, doesn't refuse, surfaces the impact, and has a discussion with the team member or stakeholder. And he handles the retro. So now we are in a position where we can add more team members, which we're not going to do because our team is complete. We're not going to ask Destiny to audit any persona at this particular point. And we have the option to start using the team and start using our personas in Claude code. Let's go ahead and get started. First thing we're going to do is we're going to point our directory in Claude code to our file, which we've already done. We're able to do this by opening the file and selecting the particular directory location that we want. For this specific directory location, this is a GitHub repository. And I'll just explain what we're going to be doing as our contrived task to demo how personas work and how you can work with personas. So we're going to have our project manager create a series of issues on the GitHub repository. And this is going to be centered on using an existing database I have that is a sales database. It's a Microsoft example database called Wide World Importers. And for this task, what we want to do is we want to create GitHub issue for creating the reports, and we want to create a REST API, and we want to be able to query sales data from it. It's going to be very simple, but it'll give you a good idea, and it should touch on all of our members. So the first thing I'm going to do is list my team members. As you can see, we have all of our personas that we've created. It's letting me know I can activate any of them with the /team/handle. Let's give me an example of /team/Brad to bring Brad online. But you can also use standard conversational language when you're calling them. So the first thing that I want to do here is I want to talk to my project manager, and I want to describe the project and have them break it down into one or more issues that we can assign. So I'm going to start off with the following prompt. Jay, we need to create some reports for our customers. What this is going to entail is creating a REST API in .NET using Web API that will be able to connect to our Wide World Importers database and select data regarding sales. We are currently working in the following repository: GitHub, greenflagsoftware, virtual team demo. Tell Claire to make a note that that's the repository we're working on for our virtual teams demo. Create issues as work items on GitHub. You could create one or more issues depending on how you think we should break down the work. As you can see, it's running the team skill, reading the persona. He's handed the repository location to Claire. Claire is our records manager for documentation, business knowledge, secrets, meeting records, onboarding, project history. This way, we'll have a knowledge base and a context that the virtual teams demo is associated with this GitHub repository. So the record has been filed with Claire. Jay's instructing us that he's splitting this into 6 work items across setup, data features, and security, with a clear seam between Brad's API and Sam's data layer work. Brad is our senior software developer and Sam is our data engineer. So that sounds absolutely on point. Okay, as we can see, 6 issues were created. Setup for scaffolding the Web API solution, data, WWI, DB context, and sales entity models. There's some features: sales summary report endpoints, customer sales detail endpoints, sales analytics endpoints, API authentication and authorization. So we have these particular tasks that are assigned to Brad and Sam. Let's see what Jay has done for us. Heading over to our virtual team demo repository, we're going to look into issues. We can see the 6 issues that were created. We have infrastructure, features, data, and setup. So let's go ahead and look at some of these endpoints, or excuse me, some of these work items. Okay, so we see that we have a summary, endpoints, acceptance criteria, and prerequisites. Now, if this were a real project, this is where you might have to do some back and forth with your project manager, such as the API routing endpoint, some of the technical details that are involved with it. You may have to go to one of Sam's cards and tell him which tables to use, what database schema to use if you want him to create views or whatnot. But for the purposes of this demo, we're going to leave this as is. We can see that we have acceptance criteria, notes, and an assigned to column here. Everything looks correct. We can see some useful notes regarding sequence E that Jay has given us. Number 2 is the gating prerequisite, which means that has to be done first. Unblocks all 3 issues, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Sam has a touch point on 3 and 6, the schema review and query performance, respectively. I'd want Brad to pick up number 2 first and confirm the scaffold is solid before anything else pulls from the data layer. It's asking me if I want Brad or Sam in to start scoping estimates. I'm going to start with Brad. I'm going to say pull Brad in to have him start scoping estimates. And he can ask me any questions if he needs more information. We can see that Jay has pulled in Brad. Brad here, Jay pulled me in. Let me look at what we're working with. Okay, we can see that there are some estimates, which I wouldn't pay too much attention to because I think this is not a 1 to 2 day project. It's probably a 2-hour project. That being said, Brad has informed us that there's a blocker, an off mechanism. That is who's going to call the API, so he needs some more information on that. A particular interest here is database connectivity. I just tried the WWI connection. It's not configured in this environment. This comes down to what we touched on earlier about storing secrets in a .env file in your Claude folder. This is where I would want to stop and create environmental variables or variables in that environment folder or file that have the name of the database, the connection string, and everything that would be needed to connect our SQL client to the database. That's not something I just want to cut and paste into my context session because that does get shared. So secrets should be just that. They should be something that is, kept locally stored and protected. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add the connection string information to the end file. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to see if Brad or Sam can pick that up, make the connection, and we'll start talking in more detail about our schema and our tables. So we want to create a .env file, but instead of putting it in our Claude root, we're working in a project. So we can have a .env file, env, that pertains to this particular project with the connection string in it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open in Visual Studio Code my repository root, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a .env file. In this file, I'm going to add the WWI connection string. I'm going to save it. And because access to this file has been granted to Claude or this directory, Brad and Sam should be able to read this connection string and use this to make a connection with the SQL command line. Now that we have our connection string, I've asked Clair to keep track that we have a .env file in our project which contains the connection string. Claire recorded that. She stored our connection string, so now it's in our knowledge base. I told Brad to ask Claire for the connection string to connect to the WWI database and also to add the .env file to gitignore. So Brad pulled Claire's records. He was able to connect, and I asked him to examine the database schema to see what we would need for our API. He connected to the database. He looked at our row sizes, sales orders, order lines, invoices, invoice lines, customers, stock items, which look like the tables that we'll need. Then he gave us a few notes about geography columns, which I'm not going to get into. Those are spatial columns, and we don't need those. Temporal tables, a couple of other things that might affect the entity framework generation. And he ended with a question. How should credit notes be handled in revenue totals? Exclude them entirely, subtract them from gross, and show them to net, or surface them as a separate file? I'm going to say, for the purpose of simplicity, that we are going to exclude them entirely. Now I'm going to ask Brad to pass that list of tables that we are going to be using in this project so that we don't have to requery them. So we want that in our knowledge base. Brad has informed me that he's routed that to Claire. She's created a file. He still needs me to answer the credit question, which I thought I did, but he said that it might have been an accidental send. So I'm going to give him that information. For credit note, ignore them entirely. So now it's asking me if we want to scaffold the .NET Web API project right now. I don't want to do that. I want to illustrate something else. Oftentimes you will be creating new sessions. This is good to do somewhat frequent basis so that your context window doesn't get giant. But we have that taken care of so we can pick up where we left off. I'm going to ask Brad to tell Nichole where we are leaving off, and we're going to pick up later because we're going to talk to Sam next. Typically, you might tell this to the project manager, but I want to illustrate all of our personas, and Nichole is our administrative assistant. So for general information like this, anybody can come and ask her, hey, where's Brad at on that project? So you can see that he is telling Nichole where we're at. It's also telling me that the off mechanism is undecided. So let's go ahead and take care of that now. We'll say for okay, I'm saying for phase one, we'll be working on localhost. Let's leave the off mechanism out for this phase. Update Nichole. Okay, we're at a clean break. So what I'm going to do is demonstrate opening up a new session like if you're coming to work the next day. I'm going to ask Brad and Sam to get with Nichole, see where we are, what items we have remaining. Okay, we can see that Brad has given us a status brief. Planning's done, zero code written, all 6 issues open untouched. Jay scoped and created all 6 issues, a 7 to 8 day estimate. Connectivity was confirmed. Schema review, waiting on stakeholder input, API consumer type. API key is a right call. That decision gates the auth estimate, and you're ready to build. So I'm going to have Brad tell our project manager, Jay, to add notes to any of the relevant issues that cover where we are. Brad, tell Jay to update the Git issues with any relevant state information on the project. So Jay is letting us know that Brad's brief was thorough and that he is going to update our Git issues and add notes for status. Heading over to our GitHub repository, we're going to see at what points our issues were updated. So we know for sure that we have deferred our authorization here. So it looks like Jay added deferred phase 2. Targets local host development only, no auth mechanisms required at this stage. Issue will be revised when the API is promoted. So that is an update to our work item. Looks like some of the others we do have some status updates. No implementation has been done. So this looks good. This is what we would expect from our project manager. Now, before moving on, we're going to have a meeting. We're going to get with Jay, the project manager, Sam, the DBA, and Brad, the developer. We're going to see if we should use database views instead of direct queries on the tables, as it might be faster. So I'm saying, Jay, get Brad and Sam in a meeting. I want them to discuss whether we should use SQL views for the sales reports versus table direct queries. As you can see, they're having a meeting right now. I want one thing, hopefully, that comes out pretty clear. How so far we've been working with these personas like one would work with an actual team in an environment. We're not using a lot of slash commands or having to memorize a lot of skills. We're just talking to our team in a normal conversational manner. So let's see what the results of this meeting were. I'm going to summarize. Okay, so starting off with Brad, his opinion on the matter is that because Entity Framework uses LINQ and it's composable, that using EF Core with LINQ keeps the navigation where we need it if we're mapping customers and orders and things like that. Sam basically agreed with him on point 4 and 5. There is this issue, is credit note equals 0, because we're ignoring that to filter. Sam initially said that it belongs in the database, not the application layer, regardless of what approach we use. Ultimately, Sam recommended filterable detail and summary as a direct Entity Framework core table queries. And as far as the analytics, he informed us that the SQL view potentially index sitting on the column store index EF core queries it as keyless entity. Aggregation logic lives in the database or can be optimized. Essentially, he was saying that our sales and orders tables really are sitting there for batch processing, and that a view might be able to make this more efficient and do the aggregation for us. And he's given us a cross-cutting concern: is credit note zero filter documented? It's a mandatory convention enforced by code review or anything touching it. Brad is saying that splits the work for 4 and 5. He'll implement the base query specification. I'll wire up a keyless entity against the view Sam defines. So Sam is going to define a view. Review the data definition language with the column store friendly aggregation. Then he updated Jay. He said it's a good discussion. He's taking away, and he went ahead and he updated the issues that we have on Git with the relevant takeaway notes. So we are now in a much better place, and we're drilling down our requirements. And we're doing it by working with a team, much like we would in a real world. At this point, we've pretty much communicated with everybody. And I think the point about working with a team and how they can work together, how you can utilize this to really enhance your workflows and how you work with AI assistants is apparent. However, I mentioned that there was one very important team member, Destiny. Destiny is actually responsible for the tooling improvement. So after working with the session for a while, it's good to take a step back and look at some of the things that we think that went correctly with our skills and some of the things that we would like to improve on. So I'm going to ask Destiny right now to make an improvement. Now, what's that going to be? I noticed when they were looking at the database schema, I believe it was Brad, that was a little bit slow and a little bit inefficient. They used a query to describe basically each database table, looping through the database. And I think that there's probably a more efficient way to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Destiny to add an item for skill improvement. And we're actually going to benchmark different ways of getting information out of the database and see if we can pick the quickest one and make a skill that can be shared between Brad and Sam, so that if we have to query any other databases in the future for different projects, that can be done efficiently. So let me go ahead and do that now. Another thing I want to demonstrate is how that you can use voice commands. There are a number of ways of doing this. On Windows, you can use Windows H, which will bring up a narration, which allows you to record yourself and it translates it to text. I like to use a tool called Whisperflow, so I'm going to do that. The main takeaway here will be just that using communication via microphone through Claude is something that can really help speed you up. Also makes it feel more like you're working in a team environment naturally the way you're used to. Destiny, I want you to talk to Brad and Sam for a skill improvement. When Brad was querying the database objects, the schema, to see what tables we needed, I think it was done in an inefficient manner. I think there could have been an easier way to do this. I want to create a skill which will initially research the web, possibly using the Context 7 tool to see some opinions on the fastest way to do this. And in order to complete that skill, I actually want to use benchmarks so that we can try a number of items and see what gives us information the fastest and develop that into a skill. So this is, again, where we're going to get into skill improvement. Destiny is the person who's responsible for this. As you can see, Destiny is having a conversation with Brad and Sam, and Destiny is asking Brad to walk her through exactly what you did when you examined the schema. Brad tells her what was done. Destiny asks how long. Brad told her why he needed to get columns, data types, whatnot. Destiny asked Sam from a data layer perspective, what's the right approach? Sam got into information schema views versus catalog views and what might be a particular fit for what. So Destiny's looking at the direction to research the current practice and benchmark before I write anything. One thing of note is that Sam rightly pointed out the fact that we're using an MCP round trip and that the time could be substantial on that. What I would expect to see and what I'm going to ask for is if using the SQL command directly would be faster, which I assume would be the case, versus an MCP tool. This is an MCP tool that I have to connect to my WWI database that I installed some time back. The team was able to find that, and that is what was used for the database queries. So Destiny has run some benchmarks, completed our skill, and created our skill so that our team can use it in the future. Destiny also gave us the approaches that were tested and what the findings were. So the first one we did, where it seemed to take quite some time, there were 12 calls. It was slow and incomplete because there was a 20 row limit. She attempted the information schema join. It was one call. The result was insufficient on that. The sys catalog queries was three calls, but it was fully structured and it's the winner. So now we have a finding documented in a skill, execute query tool, blocks column aliases, containing words delete or update. The FK query was adjusted accordingly, and we have a new skill. Ready to run queries. EF core flag reference table, index type, explicit guidance on when and when not to use the tools. And it is also nicely listed the sources where the information came from. Okay, so what was actually created for us? As I mentioned earlier, that personas and commands and skills are just text files. Since we had this in a repository, I'm going to go ahead and look at what was uploaded to Git after I committed our personas. And we can see our text files. They're actually in markdown format, and it created a roster for us. Nicely highlights our team members and what they do, how they collaborate with each other. If I were to look at that raw, this is what it looks like. This is how Claude might see things. Let's take a look at some of our personas. Let's look at our software developer. So we're given an identity, a personality, a tone, communication style, responsibilities. We can see the responsibilities. How does he work with the team, with the project manager, with the DBA, with the rest of the team? Let's take a look at our most important persona, which is Destiny. This is our tooling improvement persona, skills administrator for the team. Gives a breakdown of the file system ownership, which points to our skills directory that we're using for new skill definitions and commands. They will be placed in this repository so the context can read that and see that's what we're doing. So if we look at our commands, we'll see that we have commands that were written by Claude for our personas. So we have activate persona Brad. This just tells it to read the markdown document in a context and the roster to see what other team members there are so that Brad is familiar and knows what the collaboration rules are and who else he can talk to. So a lot of these are really going to look the same. These are the files that I mentioned that are in the same structure that should work with other popular AI assistants, Gemini, ChatGPT, most other systems that make use of large language models. So that is the magic. Everything that we worked on in the demonstration is predicated on these files being in certain locations and the context knowing about them. I'm going to complete the presentation here. At this point, you've got a very good introduction as to what working with personas looks like. Having a team with dedicated roles and responsibilities, and having conversations with your team just like you would in the real world. I've started using personas for multiple projects I'm working on. In the past, I would write skills, I would write slash commands. The skills would add up in my directories. Sometimes it'd be hard to remember what skill I had written for which purpose. There would often be skill overlaps that would contradict each other. Additionally, when working with teams that were using Claude, human teams, our skills and commands would be stored in repositories, and they grew quite rapidly. It was hard to know what was out there, when to use it, and when to incorporate it into my workflow. Working with personas helped me create a natural feeling environment where I was able to delegate tasks to virtual team members. These virtual team members actually did quite a better job at picking skills necessary and maintaining updated skills, especially with assistants like Destiny as our tooling persona. I felt like using personas cut out a lot of the background noise, the command lines, the reading markdown files, and let me get back to focusing on the big picture. I hope you've enjoyed this demonstration, and I hope it gets the wheels spinning in your head on what kind of team you might create. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in a comment section. I will try to get back as soon as possible. Thanks for watching.